The government loves to manipulate the housing market, and they are starting to position themselves to do it again.
Well, I know they keep, by the way, I don't know if you guys know, but Bessent, Trump, they're starting to use this word, housing emergency, declaring emergency. Now, why this is important is so some of you might know this, but this goes back to what's called the Stafford Act. So the Stafford Act basically means, and it's never been used for housing, so this is why this is very, very interesting. It's always used for disasters and things like that. And essentially what it does is it unlocks things and it fast tracks the government. So the president can use this. So you probably heard this with let's say your governor. You know, we have a state of emergency. So they have to declare this. Well, they've been using it for housing, which is very, very interesting, I think, because it's never been used for housing. So, you know, let's dive into why. And is this really just, like a balloon being sent up before they're going to do this? I don't know.
Well, and you also have to look at who and what it actually helps, right? So a lot of people think, oh, if they declare a housing emergency, somehow prices are going to go down. And that's not necessarily the emergency that the Trump administration is talking about. They are not very concerned necessarily with the price of housing, but instead with the monthly cost of housing. And that is a very different concern. So let's describe why they feel it's a housing emergency. So the first thing that they've pointed out is a rapid rise in cost and the fact that homes are not selling right now.
Yeah, well, I think there's an affordability issue that all of us can, there's a lot of focus on, fuel and food, right? There's less focus on housing, right? At least right now. And so, but we all know that the mortgages are way up, and rents right now they're getting beat up a little bit as a result of the oversupply, the current temporary oversupply that we've been talking about. So right now it is a bit of a renter's market, but this is going to change extremely quickly. Like I would say, by the end of this year, that's going to be over. It's going to start to become a landlord's market again. And if you guys don't know exactly why, you can just go back to some of our other episodes, because we walk you through the exact supply issues. And we were in a shortage before. I think that's important to understand. We've been in a shortage, guys, and this is basic math. Basic math is this. There's more people that want houses than there are houses. That's it. Now, it might not be true in your individual county or city or whatever it is, but generally from a national housing standpoint, we are severely undersupplied, and it kind of kicked off after the great financial crisis. After the great financial crisis, there was not a lot of new housing built. Obviously, people were licking their wounds, banks were taking on real estate, and people lost a bunch of money and all that kind of stuff. And that was called 07, 08. That lasted a while. And then after a while, people started kind of stabilize, but it took years. And then only then did it kind of start to get going again. And it started, and people were adding supply and all that, and it was great, and prices were low and all those kinds of things. And boop, inflation went up. Boop, up went the interest rates, and all of a sudden everybody pulled back again. So we made a little bit of a dent in something that really started 17, 18 years ago. And at the same time, population grew. So you have this population, you have this demand, and of course you have all kinds of nuances between single family and renters and all that kind of stuff. And, we're looking at this from a national perspective.
So let's get into why, though, it's important here. So when they say housing emergency, the first thing that they were looking at is the stagnant supply. So what I think is interesting about that is, for those of you that know that also think housing prices are going to come down, there's a lot of you, that it's because the purchasing has slowed down due to high interest rates and also inflation. But you have to understand that the government looks at this as part of an emergency, right? And what they realized in the last housing correction was they didn't do a good job. Like, they let housing prices fall. And if you go and look at the research that they look at, they think that was a mistake, because it affects so much of the economy. So, they're looking at this stagnation as, we need to do something about the stagnating housing supply before prices drop. And that's what we've kind of been telling you guys on this channel is the government does not want housing prices to drop. So you have to understand that, even if that's what you want. The other thing that we're looking at is the high interest rates, which is obvious because we've been talking about that. They know that this is a problem. They know this is one of the biggest things that is creating a stagnation in the selling of houses, because everybody calculates to their monthly payment. And to prove that housing is an anchor of the economy, this is part of their declaration that it's an emergency, because housing drives 18% of the US GDP.
Yeah, and I think a lot of you guys probably are going, well, this is Trump or this is Biden or whatever. Like, I want to just take you back into history real quick, because I think this is important. If you go back to FDR, which of course none of us were around back then, Franklin Delano, he started something was called the New Deal. So they had issues back then, and he had quote, he said, 1/3 of the nation is ill-housed, 1/3 of the nation is ill-nourished. And so that was the FHA was formed, the U.S. Housing Authority. Then Truman also stepped in and did the Housing Act. And then LBJ did HUD in the 1960s. And then, of course, Carter had a whole bunch of stuff around affordable housing and these programs that a lot of you guys know about today. Bush and Obama specifically had what was called the Housing Affordable Modification Program, or HAMP, which is a result of the called the GFC. So why do I bring all that up? Because every president, including Clinton, all of these presidents had housing on their radar. They had programs and policies they were trying to push through, and they did. And some were, believed that everyone needed to own a home. Some had these big programs, which Danille's going to talk about it in a minute. So what we're trying to do is project forward on what this administration is trying to do here, and how we can be on the right side of that, because it is a fact today that homelessness is up. We know that. We know that affordability is up. And so what does that really do? That affects where employers decide to go. That affects tax revenues. That affects costs for cities and states and counties, and affects workers. Workers can't afford to live near where they work. So there's a lot to this, and it's a really important topic. And I think that you guys kind of watch as these little, I would call them warning signs. It's very unusual for them to come out and declare a state of emergency for housing. It's the first time that I know of.
Yeah, and they're also trying to angle the jobs to the housing, which also does make sense, because when you say it's 18% of the GDP, you have to think of mortgage lenders, people that sell appliances, moving services, real estate agents, title companies. All of this, Jerry, we froze.
Oh, yep.
Are we on audio still? Yeah. So on all of this is, affected by the housing market. So, when things aren't selling, it's a massive issue with the economy.
Yeah, you look frozen there. I don't know.
I know,
For
right?
me, I can see this perfectly. Danille looks surprised. Yeah. So I think let's break down all the individual things that are broken right now with today's housing. And as you guys know, I'm a massive believer that everyone should first, well, I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people like myself, like Danille, like many of you, start off in the rental market. We build our credit, we pay our rent, we save money if we, all these things are busted right now. And then from there, we should be able to get into that entry level housing, which is, kind of that next step. And why is this important? It's important, guys, because if you look at where everybody's wealth is today, it's in housing. So right now, there's all this, they call it all this equity that we have sitting in people's homes, right? So there's a massive amount of equity sitting in people's homes. And this is how most people are going to be retire from, right? I'm talking about, you guys know I talk about a lot about my mom. She was a hairdresser her whole life. Her net worth really is in her home. It's not in any kind of stocks or bonds or any kind of financial products that she did with any kind of wealth management. So this is a big deal because we could be looking at a generation of people that might have to rent for life. And that is not good. Even though I'm in the landlord business and we're in the rental business, that is not a healthy place to be.
So which is why the government is stepping in. But a lot of you think, oh, they'll step in by lowering house prices. Well, if they wanted house prices to lower, they would not mess with the interest rate and they would not be declaring housing an emergency. They would be letting housing do its thing where when there's stagnation in sales, prices would go down. They're not doing that. What they're wanting to do, and this is not a, like I said, Democratic or Republican issue. They're trying to make it more affordable monthly. So that is their goal, is to make it more affordable monthly for people. And you've already seen them do things like this in the car market, right? Like, back in the day, you had to do a lesser amount of years on a car loan. Well, they extended the amount of years on a car loan so that they could charge more for the car. So now that housing has went up in cost, one of their solutions is to lower rates, and the other one is to potentially extend the loan longer for 40 years. This has been brought up because when people look for homes, they're looking at their monthly payment. This is 100% true. I deal with buyers all the time. This is what they're looking at. It's what investors are looking at, and it's what people are looking at. What is my monthly payment?
Yeah, and by the way, this is a program that HUD has right now for the commercial side. So it's what's called a 221D4. Is a multifamily it's called a construction to permanent loan that you can do. You can build a project, but it's a 40-year amortization. So imagine, guys, taking whatever mortgage you have that's set at 30 years and adding another 10. You essentially lower your monthly payment. Right. And HUD has been doing this for years already, successfully on the commercial side of the house. So this is something that I think is definitely something that could happen. And because, again, as Danille said, people solve to their monthly. So when, back in the day when I first bought a car, even when interest rates were high, I remember they were they were in the teens, if you can imagine, when I bought my first car. So I was solving to my monthly. I basically started my monthly and say, okay, what kind of car could I afford for whatever I was, $200-$300 a month, whatever the number was at the time. So that's how things work. And so one of the ways to do that is to spread this out over time. So that's why back then you could get 36 and 48 month loans. Now, of course, there's 48, 60, 72, 84 month loans. And they do that to lower the monthly payment, but also to lock you in because now you're beholden to that car manufacturer, that dealer, whatever it is, that brand. And so this is going to be a very interesting thing to see if they roll this out.
Yeah, and Josh said the 40-year will be coming for sure. And I actually don't disagree with him. It's not really, it doesn't really do much to the banks. It gives them more, they get to collect more interest over time.
This is good, guys. There's nothing wrong with this.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a 40-year mortgage. Now, some of you say, oh, you're this permanent renter, but not really because, when you have rent, it moves with inflation and it moves up with inflation. If you are on a set mortgage payment for 40 years, that payment remains the same, and it allows people to get into housing. Now, the issue with the 40-year mortgage and the issue with the Fed lowering rates is it's going to probably up prices because, once again, people solve to their monthly. We saw that in the car market. When car loans went from 5 to 8 years, cars got more expensive. So there is this sweet spot where before, prices go up from all of these things, if you buy now, you could get into the good, 40-year mortgage when they pass it, or, lower interest rates and get the benefit of that without the downside of the more expensive of a home.
Right. And so let me give you a perspective. If your rent is $2,000 and the neighborhood next to you is $3,000, let's say. So if the 40-year mortgage comes into place, that 40-year mortgage is going to go down. I don't know if it's going to go to $2,000 specifically, but it'll go down, right? Instead of it's $3,000, it'll definitely be in the twos. Okay, so all of a sudden, when it's going to affect the rental market, right? Which is my market. So that's what a 40-year mortgage would do for people, because now all of a sudden people, again, why rent when you can buy? So that, trust me, there'll be all kinds of ads. There'll be home builders. There'll be a whole industry formed around this to try to get people out of rental housing for the ones that are close. And so this will definitely affect the rental side of the house. It'll move people from rental to home ownership, which is exactly what they want. The obstacle, of course, will still be the credit and their down payment.
Yeah. And I think there's some interesting stats here as, with listings right now, because a lot of you that are waiting for home prices to correct, 48% of sellers are pulling their homes off the market if they are not getting offers.
Right.
So that is a big stat. I've seen that and the stuff we've been looking at. Unless it's vacant or they have a reason that they need to sell it, they're just pulling it off the market. And so what the Trump administration is wanting to do is to free up some of that too. I mean, they want people to be able to move freely. And in order to do that, if you bring rates down closer to where they were in 2020, then you're able to do some of that moving.
But let's be honest, like those people, they got spoiled. Like they had these rising home prices for quite some time. And they don't want to look. They don't want to look out the windshield. They only want to look in the rearview mirror and say, "This is what it was once, and this is what my expectation is." And so, but to your point, they are doing that. So it'd be like you having a stock that was high and now it's not as high, and you're like, "I'm going to wait for it to go back because I calculated the money I would make if I would have sold it at the top of the market." That's just an impossible strategy. It's impossible to always time these kinds of things. So just pulling those off the market may or may not work. But regardless of that, that's where their mindset is. They had a certain number in their head. To your point, sometimes they might be in real trouble as well, depending on when they bought and how far it went down. And in some markets, we're not seeing this at all. In some markets, we're seeing, like Danille, the under $500,000 market in the Phoenix Scottsdale market, things are flying off the shelf. I mean, literally, it's listed and it's in escrow within a day or two. You just sold something, a condo. What was it on the market? 2 days? 2 days. Reasonable offer, accepted by the seller, over. So that's very interesting because in the over 500, it's not necessarily like that. And so and I'm sure many of you have your own individual stories, but the point is that the sellers are doing all kinds of stuff, and if they can afford it, I think I sent you around this article this weekend. We call it the accidental landlord. So what they're coining this term, the accidental landlord, are the people that are taking these off the market and then they're renting them, right? So in other words, they don't want to be a landlord.
Right.
But they're accidentally now becoming a landlord. As you guys know, the rental market is kind of heating up. So this is really interesting. We might do a podcast or something on this as well. But I'm starting to see more and more about this, where to Danille's point, they put it on the market. It's sitting too long. They're getting maybe low ball offers or whatever, and they just let the listing run and they take it back. And of course, why is that? The reason is that, one, it could be the season, but two, interest rates, three, the economy, who knows why. But the reality is that some of these people are taking their homes back and they're renting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Fed decision coming up for a couple of reasons is going to be extremely interesting. So, on September 17th, the Fed's going to meet. We're going to find out if they're going to lower rates. We think they are. The real question is it a quarter or is it a half a point? And then from there, what is the government going to do as the administration has more influence on the Fed, right? Because, we're seeing bad job numbers come out. We're seeing inflation calm down. And the Fed is going to have to decide, do we focus on inflation or do we focus on job numbers? And that will be an interesting turn of events for the early next year.
Yeah, I think, we've discussed this a little bit. I had a fantastic meeting, by the way. Last week, we had Jim Rickards, if you guys know who Jim Rickards is. on a podcast. So that's coming out, what, Jerry, this week? Yeah, this week. You got to listen to that one. Holy
Thursday.
moly. Yeah, that's going to be good. Anyway, so obviously, you know, Jim Rickards, if you don't know, has written a lot of books you know, on a lot of these topics. But he also has known a lot of these Fed chairs and talked to a lot of the people and, you know, behind the scenes. And so there's basically what he said was that the government has a lot of powerful tools to pump the economy, to pump real estate, to pull back or you know, or get it going. And I think that you know, some of those things that we're starting to see recently and we also had another tech guy there. I won't mention his name, but this is a guy that you're going to know about who this person is very, very soon. But he's saying that there's these tech companies specifically aren't necessarily hiring. So what, you know, there's this natural attrition of people leaving, and there's the first question is you know, can we use AI, you know, to replace this? Do we need this position? Because in the past, obviously you never had to think about that, but there's this you know, non-hiring, silent non-hiring going on right now. And why is that important? It's important because it's going to show up in the unemployment numbers, which you guys know were dismal this week, right? And they also said one thing that you guys will hear about on Thursday, which I think is very, very interesting. And that is, you know, you guys know that Trump fired the BLS, head of BLS, and the new person's been in there less than a month, basically. So, but Jim said this was all due to bad modeling. In other words, the way that they go out and get the actual data to produce the jobs report is, you know, antiquated and dated and not that accurate, which is why they had all these adjustments later. You know, the June, I think it was May, June reports, they adjusted by 252,000 jobs. It was bad. You know, so how could you report a high number? And by the way, this has been going on for, it's not really a political issue as much of it is just accuracy. And so his prediction is this, and then we'll see, is that the head of BLS is going to actually expose the real numbers of the unemployment in these next few months. And why would they do that? They're going to do that because Trump's going to say, look, this is why we fired this person, and this information was so bad that you guys need to know what it is, and you need to rip the Band-Aid off right away for this. And so I think that the unemployment information is going to trend even worse for this, you know, as we head into the end of the year, because Trump's not going to hold back and slowly release that out over his presidency. He's going to put it all on the table, and then from there, you know, he's going to want to look like a hero to correct it. So that's why I think you know, the Fed's going to be in a pickle here, coming in. What's that?
Word from our sponsor.
Oh yeah. So, with that, we need a word from our sponsor for Monetary Metals. It's near all-time highs, but appreciation isn't the only way to benefit. Monetary Metals, you could potentially earn a yield on your gold, paid in physical gold, without selling it. Here's how it works. When you lease your gold through their platform, pre-qualified companies pay to use it under strict guidelines, like renting out real estate, but with gold. Instead of paying to store your metal, you may earn up to 4% annually in gold. You stay in control, and you can choose which leases to participate in. Monetary Metals handles the due diligence, lease terms, and all the administration. Thousands of investors use this approach to grow their gold, not just sit on it. Visit monetary-metals.com/Ken to learn more. Leasing gold involves risk, and returns are not guaranteed. This is not an offer to buy or sell securities. Please review all risk disclosures at monetary-metals.com. Visit monetary-metals.com/Ken to learn more. All right.
And let's continue to dive into this emergency declaration. So part of this emergency declaration is that they mentioned that the Fed would be able to reinvest in agency mortgage-backed securities instead of just treasuries.
Right. And this could drop the 30-year, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, the fixed mortgage rates, right? If the Fed starts getting their hands in here, trust me, guys, we're going to start to see, instead of just treasuries, this is a big deal. The mortgage-backed securities, the MBS market is big.
Yeah, and basically, if they can invest in that, that will help that yield, right? That everyone talks about, where if the Fed lowers rates, does it really lower? And the question is it quantitative easing? And
it is kind of like
it's going to
narrow the treasury to mortgage yield for sure, right? Like it's going to have to.
Yeah, they call it quantitative easing light,
QE light,
or adjacent.
Right. Well, it's not going to be. What did he call it? Temporary? No, what was it? Oh, transitional.
Yeah, transitory.
That's what transitory. That's right.
Well, so basically, if they're able to do this, and this is also going to take mortgage rates down a little bit, just because they're now injecting money into that market, right? So they don't need buyers for it if they're injecting money into it. So on the same level, right? So that is kind of what we think is going to be coming up. And if Trump is able to push his board, which it sounds like he can, then replace Lisa Cook. He obviously gets to replace the Fed chair in May. You really are going to be seeing lower rates next year. And lower rates, I'm telling you, is going to push housing prices up, whether you like it or not. I think one big thing people are missing is most investors are on the sidelines right now because the numbers aren't.
There's no cash flow.
Yeah, the math's not mathing right now,
there's no
but
cash flow.
It's close. And so if the rates come down and investors can get back in, that's when you see all cash buyers. That's when you see all the bidding that was happening in 2020. Most of that was not from first-time home buyers. Most of that was investors coming into the market with the first-time home buyers and putting them in lesser of a position. I mean, one of the properties I just sold last week was an investor, all cash, right? It's hard, a lower price, but all cash. And it's hard to compete with that if you're a home buyer that needs a 30-year mortgage. So, you just have to see your window and then just be a little bit open-minded here on if you should buy right now.
Yeah, don't get me started on this one, because I'll tell you, one of the reasons we have an affordability issue is because Wall Street is actually in the single-family housing market, as you guys know. And so as rates come down, that means cash flow, the math gets better. So for those of you who are just trying to, not invest, not even buy something cash flows, not have a renter, not be an Airbnb or not be anything, just know there's a whole nother side of this, which is, corporate investing in single family. It's here to stay. It started after the GFC in a big way. And it's under fire a little bit too, because it's documented. There's a fair amount of single family home ownership at the Wall Street level right now, competing for the regular homeowner, right? And so whether you like it or not, it's here. And so this is another piece that a lot of people think about. We oftentimes talk about that, call it the small investor that's just trying to get somebody to cash flow, like Danille. But there's a whole nother monster with a huge balance sheet that actually can come in and buy huge neighborhoods or home builders themselves. And as rates start to come down and the math starts to be better, that's going to be on their radar as well.
That was an interesting conversation with Jim Rickards we had that'll be on Thursday on our podcast. If Jerry, you can put that up. But what was interesting about it is he was telling us, and he's right, a lot of you listening are saying, well, home prices can't keep going up because we can't, like the average American cannot afford to buy a house. But what is different now is you have these big institutional buyers, and they don't need you to be able to afford a house. As long as the numbers work for them, then they can buy all the houses that they want to cash flow. Yeah. So it really takes the average, home buyer that's going to live there out of the equation.
Let's just answer this question. If you're BlackRock, do you care if people can buy a home? Yes, you do. Because they're in the rental market, right? That's they're sitting there. They don't necessarily want this, right? So, there's always another side of the coin, as Robert Kiyosaki likes to say. There's two sides, and then there's the edge. If you stand on the edge and see both perspectives, it's going to be easier for you. So, as these rates go down, and as you start to see big corporations jump into this rental market, their enemy is home ownership. So, and so I think there needs to be this incredible balance. And I tell you one thing that I think about Trump is he's trying to push affordability. And I think that's the right thing to do. I think the common person needs to get into a home and instead of paying rent, they pay that home off over time and they build equity. That's what I want for my kids. That's what I want for everybody that's actually sitting in my rental properties right now. They should have the ability, if they want, to be able to stair step into a single family home and build equity and build a financial base for themselves over the long haul.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point is that, people say, oh, what's the point? If you have a 40-year mortgage, you might never pay it off. Well, for one, it's already 30, so it's just an extra 10 years. But two is you're building equity. So when you're 60 years old and you decide you want to retire and you want to sell this house and you want to buy something smaller, you will have the equity in order to do that. Where if you're a renter for life, you're not going to have any kind of equity.
It's super simple. You either pay the landlord or you pay yourself.
Well, and I know everyone wants prices to go back, but you just have to be realistic with yourself. Like, are prices really going to go back to 2019 levels? Or some of you think, 2010 levels because you think there's going to be another crash. The truth is it's not, right? So you have to accept the reality. And then what Trump is doing is trying to make things more affordable monthly. So that's what they care about. They care about your monthly payment, just like the car market industry has done. So if they can get your monthly payment lower through federal, adjusting the rates, through making a 40-year mortgage, then more people can get into housing. And that is a net positive for those that do that, right? So you have to change your perspective and you have to change how you think about this. And I get calls every single week from investors looking to invest in something that cash flows. So as soon as things start to cash flow, there are a bunch of people that are ready to jump in. You might think it's unaffordable for the average American to buy a house, and you might be right. There's so many investors, small and these big corporations, just waiting till it cash flows. And when it does, they're going to jump in. So, as a home buyer, you want to jump in before that happens and take advantage of these cash out or of these refinances that you can do as rates drop, because that's how you're going to get into the market without having to compete against all these investors.
Yeah, and I tell you guys, you're going to see some things come out in this next administration. Obviously, Trump's going to stack his Fed. One of the interesting things that Rickard said is that the Fed has zero power. It's a fascinating conversation. We had a podcast and then we went to dinner after, and I asked him more about that. So I'll leave that for our podcast. But he essentially said the Fed has almost no power. There's something that he called the labor participation rate, which is really, really eye-opening. And he said it started at 70%, now it's down into like 62%. That's the more meaningful indicator of what's really going on with unemployment, not necessarily the unemployment number. So I would encourage you guys to listen to the details. I told Danille afterwards, we were flying. We had such an incredible in-depth conversation that I'm gonna have to listen to that thing over and over and over and over myself, because I think there's some YouTube videos, some learning videos, some podcasts we can do from inside of that data.
Absolutely. So you guys have a good week, and we will see you next Monday.
Cheers, guys.